Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm still figuring out how to do things like lighting. That's especially hard if you have glasses, so I always have these space alien rings in my eyes. Sorry if that's distracting. Okay, what is today's video about? I have planned another response video because, as you might be able to hear, I'm slightly sick and I don't have the energy to do the amount of research that I want to do for videos that, well, just need a lot more preparation. As you can tell from the title, I'm going to be responding to TYT, which is the Young Turks, which is a supposedly progressive online show. I'm not entirely sure where they broadcast. It doesn't particularly matter. I don't know, they just came upon my radar again. I used to listen to them when I was like in high school, when I was a teenager, and just really had no politics of my own at all, just followed everyone else, right? A German teenager who can't vote in the US elections, but was really interested in the Obama campaign and then in the Sanders campaign, and but then I don't know, I stopped watching TYT at some point. I don't even really remember why. I looked into it. They have a number of videos on prostitution over the years. Too many for me to look at all of them. I just look at the first three that just kind of piqued my interest from the title. Turns out one of them was about Germany, and since I'm German and, you know, my primary knowledge about the sex industry is in relation to my country, I thought this is what I would respond to. And what I really want to do again is, this is not just about the people in the video and what they say. I think the way that the Young Turks report about prostitution is really emblematic about how really all news report about prostitution in a manner that's incredibly voyeuristic and objectifying to the women in it. And progressive news is no exception. In some ways, it's even more egregious because they also claim to be supporting the rights of women in the sex trade. Right, so what I want to talk about is both how does the media report, how does it frame the issue, what kind of images does it use, what kind of language does it use. What we're also going to talk about is, again, sex buyers. I think people really like to forget in the debate about stigma that the biggest group of rapists and murderers of women in the sex trade are sex buyers. And then further, we like to forget that this group of men also shapes all of our institutions, right? They're politicians, they are journalists, they are news media anchors, they are pseudo-leftist activists, and anything you can imagine. Let's just get into the video, and I think you'll see what I mean.
Back in 2002, Germany legalized prostitution, and that actually led to an oversaturated market. There were many brothels. In fact, let me give you some exact numbers.
It would literally be oversaturated, I suppose.
I mean, here you have the first immature joke made by the male main host of the show. There's no point in responding to the joke itself. I want to talk about the choice of image they have there in the background. This is supposed to be German, and it says Ja, schluppen das. That's imagined fake German. I guess it could be related to schlüpfen, which can mean a lot of different things. I guess it could mean, you know, going under the blankets. And in many other contexts, you know, making fun of the German language is, you know, more than welcome. But in this case, like, it's really, really distasteful, because this is the main male host, Cenk. He won't let Anna, who's the female co-host, make this what it is, which is a human rights story. And the choice of images too, I know why the media does it, right? For clicks, right? Have a woman there, you don't see her face, but you see her breasts, and that's really a favorite method of lots of journalists. Just put, you know, big breasts, legs, high heels in people's faces, and you'll generate clicks. Even if the story is, you know, a human trafficking story, a story about rape, it doesn't matter. The problem is that majority of society has never been inside a brothel, including most men. If their only contact to the subject of prostitution are images like these, I mean, what are women? Like, they're faceless bodies. They're just hypersexualized bodies like the woman here. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the video is I'm going to put the kind of images that I wish the media would be putting on stories like these. I mean, there's really two options. One, if you want to humanize women, then show pictures of their actual face. And obviously, that's someone who is out there with their consent. There are really amazing photo projects with, to show you real women, real faces, real voices. And if you don't have that available, how about a picture of a sex buyer? There are way more sex buyers than there are women selling sex, so why don't we ever see them? And as soon as you change the picture, you get completely different associations with the sex trade right now. It's no longer a sexy joke. Actually, maybe it's a little bit gross. And this is not about saying, that middle-aged men's bodies are gross. It is gross when a man thinks he has some kind of entitlement to young, impoverished women. We know that this industry is built on poverty, at the very least, if not, a lot of human trafficking. But we're going to get into all of this, so let's continue.
I hadn't thought of that before. But if any market is going to be oversaturated, that's not such a bad one. But anyway, yes, tell me more.
So there are reportedly 3,000 red light districts or red light establishments in the country and 500 brothels in Berlin alone.
Again, with the choice of imagery, they could have chosen an image of a brothel from the outside or maybe even from the inside. Instead, we're objectifying a woman. How can this not add to, the lack of empathy that a lot of the public has for women in prostitution, where they think, they're just, some dumb nymphos, which is what a lot of people in Germany very much still think, because our media looks just like this most of the time.
It's it's been estimated that more than 1 million men pay for sex in Germany every day.
Mach schnell.
It's not clear if these numbers are correct, but it must be a huge amount just from the number of registered brothels known. And then we still have a huge black market because you don't actually eliminate the black market by making a legal one. Yeah, that's a lot of men. So why are we always talking about the women? For every seller, there must be a lot more buyers. So why don't we see some of the buyers? Why just breasts and butts?
That's a lot of brothels,
Yes.
man. They're not playing in Berlin, or apparently they are.
So the reason why I'm bringing this story up is because oftentimes when we talk about prostitution in the United States, we say it's best to legalize it because if you legalize it, you can regulate it. You regulate it, the prostitutes will remain safe. It'll get rid of Johns or pimps or anyone who can possibly abuse these women.
So how did it work out here?
It's not working out in Germany, which
Really?
is interesting. Yes.
Look, it seems like it's legal, it's relatively safe, and it's even cheaper. Where's the downside?
So here's the problem. It's become incredibly cheap. So sex is cheaper than anywhere else.
Where's the downside again? Can you come again?
Okay.
All right.
It's gotten so cheap that people will pay like a flat rate, right? And
A flat rate is when a sex buyer pays once at the entrance and then he can take as many women as he wants to a private room as many times all after each other as, he can just physically, because men have limits. This model was introduced quite early on after the liberalization of the sex trade in Germany around 2002. It's a new great business model that brothel owners came up with. Today, you should know that these are illegal. Why? Because what was happening was there was at least one time where it was so cheap that men were queuing outside a brothel that it made such an offer. Women were being used by so many men that they were physically and mentally breaking down. They were so ill and sore by the end of the day that there were reporters reporting on this, great event. Yeah, some were crying. Anna doesn't get around to saying this, but that is what a flat rate means for women. The woman doesn't earn more money because of a flat rate. Only the brothel owner does. And this is why I'm so sick of having this conversation. Is it her choice to go to the brothel? Is that really the important question? Why do men keep penetrating women when they're sore and crying? Why do we never talk about brothel owners? And that they don't care about human rights. They don't care about women's well-being. They care about the bottom line. We understand this about every other capitalist industry except this one. Even though what is subject to the market forces here are literally the sexual boundaries of women. When the market fluctuates one way or the other, they have less or more autonomy over those. Why are we tolerating an industry where women's sexual autonomy is tied to market forces, which we know is volatile, which we know fluctuate all the time, which we know someone always loses out on, someone's always on the bottom. Even if you think sex work is work, you need to acknowledge those realities, the buyers, the profiteers, and the volatility of the market.
In a lot of cases, women will perform acts for as little as $13. So
Downside.
Again, if a woman has to sell herself for something like 13 euros, 10 euros, imagine how many men she has to see per night until she makes rent. And imagine the level of absolute disrespect she gets. The men who do that think the women are less than dirt on their boot. This is in the street prostitution sector. The things that men do to women in street prostitution are so horrific. I mean, I do a lot of research on this subject, and a lot of it is dark, but that is some of the darkest stuff. What is the downside, Cenk? The downside is that men in German street prostitution are doing things like making women drink their urine. This is legal. Men are purchasing access to women who are addicted to heroin, and they can see the marks on their arms, and they say so, and there are no consequences, and this is legal. And this is why I guess I'd almost wish there was, like, you could just force Cenk to be an infield reporter, and I would like him to go to the street and take a look at what it's like for women, take a look at the drugs present, the pimps present, women being thrown out of cars by buyers. The thing is, it's not that Cenk doesn't know anything about the sex trade, it's that in this moment, he's entirely in the mind of the sex buyer. The sex buyer sees $13 and thinks, fucking amazing. And Cenk is refusing to put himself in the shoes of the woman who is having to make that offer.
Okay, I know. So the downside is they haven't properly regulated it. So there are still prostitutes that are working in terrible conditions. They're being abused. And so,
I know. Look, they got to clean that up, of course. Kidding aside.
Yeah, I mean, and just clean that up, which is what we've been trying to do for the last 4 years, making another paper tiger, making another useless law, Prostituiertenschutzgesetz, Prostitutes Protection Law, which has accomplished basically none of its goals. It's shut down a few small brothels. It's identified a handful of human trafficking victims. So it wasn't a complete waste of time, but in those 4 years, we could have built some exit programs that a lot of women need, which they especially needed during the COVID epidemic that we were completely unprepared for, because we're still saying it's just a job and it's fine. And, you know, women have savings, right? No, most women in the sex trade have debts, not savings. Yeah, just clean that up. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that human misery. I don't want to see that poverty. I don't want to see that addiction. I don't want to see that abuse.
But it almost happens no matter what you do with prostitution. It's kind of industry that unfortunately brings in really bad guys, and they start to do unscrupulous things, and I get it.
Yeah, this is where Cenk actually gets it. There is no prostitution without pimps. No country's been able to eliminate pimps, least of all Germany. On this, I always quote, again, Jürgen Rotloff, who is one of Germany's most notorious mega pimps, who ran one of these wonderful legal brothels, and it turns out, he said, it is absolutely impossible to staff this place, even with women just driven by poverty. We have to use the support of organized crime. It is not possible otherwise. And this is the reality in the business, always has been, always will be. And Cenk knows this. So how do we clean this up if this is the nature of the business? It can't be cleaned up.
That too many people are coming in because it's legal there. But if it was legal everywhere, you know, then we wouldn't have this problem. You wouldn't have to flood into Germany. You could just chill out and stay in, you know, Denmark or Belfast or Romania, wherever you are, and everybody could be fine and calm.
So he mentions the country there that, you know, the majority of women are actually from, which is Romania. They're not coming from Denmark, and they're not coming from Ireland. All of Europe is exploiting, whether it's legal or not, Romanian women, Bulgarian women, disproportionately, Nigerian women, Asian women, especially Chinese, Thai. If it was legal everywhere, you wouldn't suddenly have a rush of the local population like Danish or Irish women. It is legal in Denmark, by the way, so Denmark's a poor example. You wouldn't suddenly have a huge rush of the local women wanting to sell sex. There also isn't enough local poverty. That means in order to meet the demand, if it was legal everywhere, I mean, you already have the phenomenon right now that there are Romanian villages where people protect their girls and their women, like they won't let them walk to school alone. If the entire world had an even bigger demand for women from places like Romania, Nigeria, or Thailand, you would have villages just wiped clean of women and girls. If you raised the entire world population of men and thinking that buying sex was fine, you would see what you see in Germany. everywhere. Germany is really a prime example to showcase how having a big legal prostitution sector at home in basically every major city and in many smaller cities too does not dissuade men from going abroad. There are entire forums for German sex buyers to discuss places like Thailand. And the same is true for other countries with legal prostitution, like a lot of states in Australia have a legal industry, and these men still feel the need to go to Southeast Asia. So all you do when you make more and more legal sex trade areas in the world is, well, men just buy sex whenever. They buy it at home, they buy it on holiday, they buy it on a business trip. And like he said himself, somehow no one's able to keep these violent, brutal criminal actors out. So what makes you think if it was legal everywhere, they would move out? And they would instead morph into global conglomerates, which some of them have already done. Some are so good in their business models. You know, they open places in multiple countries, like Denmark's legal, Germany's legal, Switzerland's legal, Austria's legal. So that's a big sector of Central Europe. So you got people like the guy who runs or used to run, he now has retired. During the corona pandemic, Hermann Müller, who used to own the Pasha chain, he just went and retired while women during COVID were going homeless. He just opened businesses in places like Switzerland and Austria. And I'll make a response video where he is on TV. I like the clean, good businessman that he is being questioned about the things that happen in his brothel. He says, well, that's very unfortunate. I'm sorry, that woman was traumatized horrifically. In his case, by being prostituted, until the day of delivery, because she was pregnant. I'm telling you extreme examples, but if a legal mega brothel chain like the Pasha can't even prevent the sexual torture of women who are visibly pregnant, why do you think they will ever stick to any other standard? But the point is, when you've got multiple places, you just expand the pimp's business model. It's a pimp's wet dream that you would be able to sell women anywhere in the world, no consequences. They would ship women around like crazy. They already do now. There's no reason to believe that it would get better.
The problem is it's illegal everywhere else, so you create this one place where everybody rushes in.
Yes, so there was this one man from Florida that the Time magazine interviewed, and he said that he traveled to Germany 3 times a year because the sex is so cheap there.
Again, think about sex buyers. Think about that group of people. He can afford to go to Germany 3 times a year from Florida. These are men with a lot of money and wealth. Why is everyone caping for them?
And it's also legal in the United
States. Think about that, man. You're willing to travel and pay the expense of going all that travel just because you're getting some cheap ass.
Some cheap ass. Women are people, Cenk. It's not cute, it's not funny, it's not edgy. Everyone talks about women in the sex trade like that. Some women have to endure being talked to like that to their face. And say please and thank you, because it's part of the job. It's not funny.
So, the amount of difference between how much you would pay in your home country and Germany has to be significant for that to be worthwhile, and apparently it is.
Yeah, which is why I actually know women in the sex trade and exit from the sex trade who prefer to be in countries with prohibition. And while there's really, really cruel practices, obviously in prohibition, where you send women to jail and you give them a rep sheet and you never give them a chance at getting out of the life. There are also sectors of prohibitionist countries where the law isn't particularly enforced. The fact that it's illegal still keeps the market, a little bit down. And so women are making more money. So I know a bunch of women who've been like, well, actually being in the US in some ways was better than Germany. And I'm not advocating actually for prohibition, and I'm not at all discounting all the cruelty, the literal, just hunting for women by law enforcement that's been done under prohibition. But yeah, with prostitution, things are rarely straightforward. But of course, this is always accounting for women who can afford to, have a fair bit of anonymity, just move from hotel to hotel and not really be noticed or seen. And of course, a lot of women cannot do that. And yeah, I'll make videos in the future about the policy that I support and why I do and why it's not perfect, but in Germany, we've done a lot of arresting of women. We've done a lot of deregulating the industry and just kind of letting it run with the brilliant results that you see in this video. Yeah, there's really only one thing that we haven't done yet, which is the Nordic model. And I'll put a link down below so you can read about it, but this video is not specifically about that model, so I'm not going to go into it a lot here.
But I also got news for you. Like, all kidding aside, what do I care, right? But I will tell you this as a fair, friendly warning. Let me put it that way. Don't ever pay $13 for a hooker. Okay. Bad idea, Jeans. Okay. I mean, there's no...
Bad idea. Is he speaking from experience? Okay, I don't know. Why is it a bad idea, Cenk? It's a bad idea for the buyer, huh? Yeah, you wouldn't get a high quality illusion. He might notice some human misery. He might be meeting a woman who has struggling with a drug addiction, and that might put him off if he has just any kind of sense of reality and humanity left in him, and that would be bad for his boner.
You're gonna get something good for $13. That's I don't know. Maybe the market's so saturated in Germany, it's awesome.
What are these images? Well, either way, whatever this is trying to say, it is saying people in the sex trade are a joke. They're not really people. If they're cheap, they must be fucking ugly. We're so progressive that, yeah, we're just gonna joke about that. If this isn't stigma, if this isn't whorephobia, what the fuck do these words mean? I'm accused of hating people in the sex trade, like, every day. Because I think the sex trade is dehumanizing and violent, and not a job. These people think it's a job. And I encounter people like this all the time speaking to people in Germany. They'll say sex work is work till they're blue in the face. But does it mean anything in terms of seeing the sex seller as a human being with feelings, with a history, with maybe the need for some meaningful solidarity and support, not just words and slogans? No.
But I would say be careful on Schlupen das. Das might not be vitamin.
I do think this video is a few years old, because I don't know if you could make this today, because I feel like this is so unfunny and offensive on so many levels, and it would be to a lot of modern audiences. It would be to a lot of the people in the audience that I would imagine someone like TYT, the Young Turks, were trying to cultivate.
One guy in Germany was interviewed. He said the following: the going rate for oral sex and intercourse used to be $54 in this particular area that I don't know how to pronounce.
Geestemünderstraße.
Yes.
Geestemünderstraße.
Some women charge less than $13. And then he also says that one woman here will even do it for a Big Mac.
Because there are women in German brothels who are getting malnourished, who are not having access to enough food or to adequate food. I know this happens to other groups. I know you're all going to say, but I know truck drivers who eat shit food all day and don't move, and it's bad for them. In the sex trade, women's bodies and psyches are being, for many of them, slowly destroyed just by the way that the brothel itself functions. And I'm going to make an entire video about that, where I show you disproportionate and unique risks associated with the sex trade. Do you know any other occupation where the service provider, whatever we ask to seriously drink someone's urine, or would be in an advanced stage of pregnancy, still working and giving birth at the workplace? I don't think so. So that's just a small peek into what that video is going to be like. It's not going to be a bunch of horror stories. It's going to be very mundane things. But mostly I'm telling you these things because I want you to really stop romanticizing legal brothels. They are not what a lot of media makes them out to be. And Cenk won't get Anna to the point where she is at least trying to tell us some of these uncomfortable things.
You don't want that, dude. You don't want the girl who's going to do it for a Big Mac. Don't do it, dude. Don't do it.
I love how you're worried about the guy who's looking for the sex. What about the woman who's in the type of financial situation
totally
that
right.
she would do a
worst.
sex act for a Big Mac?
And isn't that really key? It doesn't matter if that woman has a pimp. It doesn't matter if that woman entered prostitution because she thought it'd be a great adventure, which that happens sometimes. It's irrelevant. Poverty is a pimp. Poverty is a pimp. If you're buying women for food, How are you any different from the aid workers at Oxfam who went to Haiti and other places ravaged by natural disaster and denied women and children food, before they'd been able to sexually abuse them? A man who does that in that scenario in Germany at a legal street curb is exactly the same as that Oxfam aid worker.
You're worried about the guy.
Totally right. You're totally right. I'm guilty. I don't know what I was thinking, but yes, we should consider the prostitutes' well-being as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's maybe after all this talking about where you can get the good sex as a buyer, maybe talk about the human rights. I don't know. Before I finish this video, I want to show you 2 more clips that I think are relevant here. Like I said at the beginning and maybe somewhere in the middle, a lot of this media around the world is produced by men who are sex buyers or their best buds with sex buyers. And I don't know what Cenk Uygur is, but one, he is an old school sexist. I find him completely indistinguishable from, well, any guy in a bar or, amongst his best bodies, thinking he's so edgy by making inappropriate jokes. I don't know if Cenk Uygur is a sex buyer, but I know he's a big fucking hypocrite because I'm going to show you this clip.
For somebody to be a sex worker, I think, I respect that choice. I'll put it that way, but I certainly wouldn't want anyone I know to do it. And I'm just keeping it real.
You wouldn't want anyone you know doing it. Why, Cenk? Why? Isn't it just a job? Wouldn't you be excited? Why not? Why would you not be thrilled? Why would you not want that? Why not, like women and girls you love and care about? Why not? I'd really like to know. And I want to show you one more video, which is a very, very short clip by this guy who's also on this show, who's also part of the Young Turks. His name is Hasan something. Doesn't matter. He's the nephew of this guy, Cenk. And a co-host, like I said, or used to be, irrelevant. And he has been going around Twitter calling people names for opposing prostitution, including women who have lived the sex trade and know what it's like. Survivors of the sex trade get called swerfs all the time, which is a term just for anyone who thinks the sex trade isn't a fucking great job opportunity. Term doesn't mean much more. So he's been celebrating the sex trade, proclaiming what a great ally he is, and I wonder what his motivation is. I think this video will be enlightening.
You ever had an escort? No shame, obviously sex work is real work. I've had sex with not even escorts, but also like straight. I've gone to a brothel, Artemis in Berlin, and had sex with the workers there. Yes. I don't hide it. I don't give a shit. Why would I?
Yeah, why would you, Hasan? Why would you be ashamed of going to the Artemis in Berlin? But the main point is, a lot of public figures, influential people, he's some kind of leftist political influencer, I guess, they're sex buyers. And when they sex workers work, they're saying, I want to get my nut out on the push of a button whenever I feel like it on my terms. And I don't particularly care about women's well-being. It's got absolutely nothing to do with respecting women in the sex trade. Nothing. Nada. Nothing. And since he mentioned the brothel that he went to, kudos to him for mentioning the brothel, because then we can actually look at that brothel. I mean, one, they have associations with the Hells Angels, so very progressive of you, Hasan, going there. I want to give you an inside look on the Artemis brothel, but briefly before I do, I want to discuss its name. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt. She is the goddess who does not sleep with men. That's kind of the whole deal. She may have been insinuated to have been interested in women rather than men. When you step into Artemis's lair, she kills you. So I'm not religious. There are no gods. That's one of the reasons why I watch TYT. I'm an ex-Christian coming to atheism and then just being excited for just might meet any other atheists and skeptics, and I thought that was so great. But I still think that there is something with the sex trade taking all these powerful goddesses like Aphrodite. Aphrodite is not just sexy. Aphrodite is an incredibly powerful goddess. in that spiritual tradition. And even though I am not spiritual, Artemis and Aphrodite as concepts, as ideas about female power and female autonomy and female sexuality and female freedom do mean something. And when take their names, take their images, and associate them with violence and degradation, I do also think that that is a cultural or an intellectual assault. And I know some people are going to say that's ridiculous. Most of the time I talk on this channel here about things done to the physical body, but desecrating the stories for women and girls where we are worth something, where we are godly, because no one's doing that to Zeus or Hercules or, well, I'm sure there's porn about anything, but when they are sexualized, they are not victims. They're not passive. They're not offering themselves up to be taken. They're like this. And naming the brothel Artemis it's just this to all women and girls. The narratives we tell in society about who is worthy, who is heroic, who is powerful, these do matter. These do shape us. Like, I'm not stupid. I know that the owners named this brothel Artemis, possibly even by mistake, because they mixed up Aphrodite and Artemis, but mainly because they have some kind of pseudo-Mediterranean thing going. And still, the fact that this brothel is so well known means that a bunch of people who grew up in Berlin, to them, Artemis is not a goddess, it's a brothel. To a bunch of girls, it's not a story that they get to read where they get to identify with a character or see a female figure that's powerful. They hear about Artemis when someone makes a joke like, you better do your homework or that's where you'll end up. So to finish this video off, I'm just going to read you one news article about a woman reporting what is life like in the Artemis. I nearly died. This is how a young woman describes her time in the Artemis. Constantly being touched by all these men made her feel disgusting. Some weekends, she was having to service 20 buyers or more. Her boyfriend, who was also her pimp, forced her into prostitution. When she came home and didn't bring enough money, he beat her. Nobody cared. Sex buyers actually start coming to the brothel in the morning. You know, some do it before work, some do it in the lunch break. There's always food there. They come during all hours of the day. Men come from many different countries, while, surprise, surprise, most of the women are from Romania and Bulgaria. If they want to leave the building, they're only allowed to do that in cases of emergency, or when there's really no demand going on. When there are men walking around looking for women, you're being pressured to go there. Any woman who starts a shift has to finish it. You could argue, oh no, she can just stop that shift anytime. But when she starts her shift, she's actually paying the brothel owner money for the room. So she starts her shift in debt. Then she works off the money that she's paying to him. Then she might be working off the money she's paying to a pimp. And then she starts making her own money. That's how it works. The first shift starts at 11, the second one at 8. It is legal to do double shifts. So that's women having to be sexually available to men for 9 hours and sometimes 18. This is legal in Germany. There are no legal limits on the shifts. Regulated my ass. The woman who's the survivor of trafficking in the Artemis reports, women do a lot of chit-chatting with each other during the break. This is just when there's no buyer. This is how you spend your time. But you don't make a lot of real friendships in brothels. She says when she showed up with bruises to work, no one said anything. No one asked anything. She says that she saw 2 other Romanian women who were putting makeup over major bruises, over hematomas on their bodies. No one said anything. And women don't know each other by their real names. They know each other by their working names. He states what I talked about earlier. Both the sex buyer, when he walks in, pays $80 just to get into the building. And then the woman pays $80 for the room as well. That's amazing, right? Imagine, where else are you paying to work? Because the $80 from the buyer don't go to her. And then the brothel makes a lot of money by selling a lot of alcohol. And one way that women can make more money is if they make the sex buyers buy them drinks. So you're also risking alcoholism and your liver on the job. And you're all going to say, there's alcoholism in other jobs. The thing is, if you're really, really drunk, you can't consent to sex. Just FYI. And then it talks about how this entire industry works, right? The women are self-employed. And this is how, again, brothel owners get around having any responsibility towards them, because we're just renting rooms. These women are self-employed. This means they're not necessarily insured via their work. They don't have sick pay. They don't have maternal leave. They don't have all those things that full employment contract will get you. And they have to sign a paper that says, I choose to sell sex. So again, all that the brothel owners are doing is covering their own ass. And this article says, in 2014, one of the public German administrations was trying to find out how many women have full-time work contracts in legal brothels. And they couldn't find any. None. Zero. Another reason why women are not signing these contracts is illustrated here. It is that they fear that if they do sign them, they'll be pushed even more to take on men. The idea is when she's self-employed, she can walk away from the customer more easily. And in reality, again, if there's not a pimp, a person, there's the poverty, there's the competition pushing her to take on men. But here it talks about how there's a young woman sitting at the pool who's naked, and there is a man, an older man, who starts, touching her, who's trying to hug her. And she is like, and walks away. Even if you believe that this young woman finds many, many men in the brothel that she happily takes to the room, a condition of working in a brothel is being constantly sexually harassed. And again, a lot of these women are naked. How much freedom of, deciding who gets to see and touch you do you have? Very little in the reality of how it works, just in the way that everything is set up. And prostitution, if it really was a job like any other, what the women were doing here would be criminal, because in the example that it uses, this is a group of businessmen from Bangalore. This young woman selling sex from Moldova, and the report says Indians are too aggressive. Some of them bite, or they want to push their tongue into my mouth, and I don't want that. If it really was a job like any other, then this Bangalorean businessman could sue her for racist discrimination. And then once you're in the room with the buyer, he pays about $60. You're just paying off the room rent or any other extra costs you might have accrued. And 60 euros buys him half an hour of penetrative vaginal sex with a condom. And alternatively, he can have oral sex without a condom. And then he has to pay 50 euros extra if he wants to ejaculate into her mouth. Even if you don't believe that might be upsetting or traumatizing when it's unwanted, poses a health risk that you don't have in any other job, because that'd be completely illegal, completely violating OSHA in any other job. And you can also have anal sex, but you have to pay 100 extra. And whenever you're paying extra, this is because the woman is taking an additional significant risk, at the very least to her physical health, in many cases also to her mental health. And this is what many people think is really great, the security all around. Again, a lot of security firms have no qualms hiring people with record. I'm not saying these are Hells Angels, but they might well be. And there's cameras. And cameras are supposed to be in women's interests and keep them safe. Women in brothels like these still get raped and murdered. You know what this also does? This makes her vulnerable to becoming a victim of revenge pornography. Because whoever rents the cameras and the security system has footage of her walking around naked. I looked into this a little more. I found an advice, a blogger who recommends different brothels around the world. And he said that if you're a woman and you are not a cleaner or a woman selling sex at the Artemis, you're not allowed to enter the building. This is not the only place in Germany where there are red light district buildings or streets where it says no women allowed. Like women who sell sex are not women. Or women who don't sell sex, why are they not allowed in this environment? It's because men want to be amongst themselves. Because if all women in society knew what men were doing in brothels, there would be a massive outcry. The owners of this place make 3 million euros a year with this location where these things are being done to women. You don't think that just maybe someone who makes that kind of profit would be investing in lobbyists to keep the industry legal and as deregulated as possible? investment bankers are investing in brothels because it's so profitable. You think maybe investment bankers have a financial interest in keeping the legal sex trade going? Would love it if it was legal everywhere in the entire world so they could swoop in and make a profit. I should also mention later in the article, it talks about how these women are taxed. So actually people from the tax agency come and take off money from women as well. And they're actually making them pay 30 euros per day. And the idea is if you make you do your taxes, you're going to see some of that again. Yeah, I'm sure that all those women from Romania, Moldova, and Bulgaria who may not even speak our language, it's hard enough for someone like me to figure out how the fuck to do my taxes. You think that they're getting it back from the state. No. Everyone is profiting from this. Everyone is profiting from women. And it talks some more about the story of the woman and her pimp. So this was one of these lover boy cases. So what he did was pretend to be a loving boyfriend and then start pimping her out. She lost her virginity to him. And then just the second time already he started the process which is called breaking in. And sex buyers know about this because they talk about the forums, which is where a woman is raped so brutally, so many times, that she's so psychologically broken that she loses the ability to verbalize or show in any manner that she has sexual boundaries, that she doesn't want something. And then they start sending her to the brothel. This is what happened to this woman. So she spent half a year in various brothels, seeing a lot of dirt, a lot of disgusting things, cocaine, vodka. She was having bladder infections so bad that she would pass out. And then he took her to Berlin, to the Artemis, because he had ambitions of becoming, one of the Hells Angels. This pimp did what a lot of pimps do, which is tattoo onto the woman's body, tattooed property of Erman, because that's his name. One of the things I do is study what sex buyers say, and they see tattoos like this, and they talk about it, because it's not that rare. So this woman was incredibly brave and did what a lot of women don't feel able to do for very good reason. She went to the police. As a consequence to this woman going to the police, there was a raid and there were investigations into the brothel, and they couldn't prove that human trafficking was a pattern. They could prove it in her case, but they couldn't in others. At the end, they had to settle for charging with tax evasion because our laws have such a narrow definition of pimping that it's just very hard to make anything stick, especially to the owner, because the owner can always say, I was just renting rooms. I'm sorry if that woman had trouble at home. I'm so terrible, awful, terrible. But it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. We can still see that the reality in the legal brothel is not sweet. It's not cool. It's not clean. It is in many ways extremely disturbing. This has been known for some time. I don't know when Hasan went to the Artemis, but stories like these are not new. They're not hard to investigate. With nearly every major brothel chain in Germany, if you just put it into Google, you'll find stories like these. So I don't know how any man with any kind of empathy for his fellow human beings can go to a legal brothel in Germany. Because even if there's 10% chance that the woman that you're touching and putting your penis into is disgusted, is high, is traumatized, how can you live with yourself? Think critically about who produces media, what aspects of the sex trade they're emitting. Think about what kind of images they use, what kind of language. Are these women's allies? The brothel owners, the sex buyers, the progressive lefty men? Are we going to leave women's fate in their hands? Or are we going to do something?